We're live.
Live Senate Appropriations, March 25th. We're going over FY26 budget request. We have the Ethics Commission. And the Executive Director, why don't you introduce yourself and walk through the presentation?
Sure, my name is Christina Siverett. I'm the Executive Director of the State Ethics Commission. I've been in that position since late 2022. And so this year, our budget request is fairly simple in terms of it covering our expenses for last year, and then a bit more complicated or not complicated in the sense that we have asked for 2 additional staff persons. So our budget request, building on last year, is $223,000, which basically covers our salaries, our basic operating costs. We have some budget built in there for our consultant, TJ Jones, who some of you may know from previous testimony on substantive ethics issues, but he's a national expert on ethics issues. He's previously the state prosecutor for Connecticut, the first state ethics prosecutor for Connecticut. He served as the head of the California State Ethics Agency, and he is a professor at UConn. And so he's been with the Ethics Commission for longer than I have, and he basically at this point functions as a we'll call him an additional staff person in the sense that we couldn't get by without him. And so he's going to be here today later to talk about our staffing request. So in addition to our budget for last year, we did make some cuts from our operating expenses. They're mainly to travel expenses. So every year we go to our annual conference. It's called COGL. It's the National Organization for Government Ethics Professionals. This year we were highlighted actually as a positive example of ethics moving forward. We were on a panel that was talking about attacks on ethics commissions, but we were the highlight because we'd actually moved forward with ethics legislation last year. So I was asked to talk about that and the accomplishments that Vermont has made in just a few short years in bringing our ethics framework, starting to bring our ethics framework up to standard in terms of other states. It was really kind of a blessing and a curse in the sense that it was great to be there as a positive example, but when I heard what the other ethics commissions already have, we're still far behind where they are. So the things that they were under attack for are things that we have not yet achieved. But that's just kind of an overall background of the Ethics Commission in terms of we are a work in progress, but our budget is still the same budget that we had before we had any powers, before we had any additional responsibilities, before we had the need for additional staffing. So for this year, we've asked for, this is a carryover request from last year, we would ask for 2 additional staff people. One is a legal counsel position and one is a staff attorney position. So we have been severely understaffed for the last year and a half, but we've been understaffed since 2022 when the state code of ethics passed. Our current staffing is 1 part-time executive director and 1 part-time executive assistant. That is the same staffing that we have had since late 2021 when we had no stated code of ethics, we had no statewide municipal code of ethics, we did not have increased financial disclosure requirements, we did not have increased training requirements, and the demand for our services was much, much lower. So when I first started with the Ethics Commission, I would say I got 1 or 2 calls every 2 weeks asking for ethics advice. I now get 3 or 4 requests a day, and those are varying levels of complexity. So sometimes somebody will, mostly they're from municipal officials at this point, there are varying levels of complexity. So sometimes people just call up and say, can I accept this gift? I go over the gift rule at the end of the conversation. Other times are things that require a lot of research and can take hours of time in order to answer someone satisfactorily. So that's satisfactorily. So this year last year in total we had 37 requests for guidance for the entire year. This year we've already exceeded that number. And when I say requests for guidance, I'm talking about requests for ethics advice. That isn't counting other types of questions. So for example, we get a lot of questions about the new training requirement for municipal officials. So one of the tasks that we took on last year was to develop an online municipal ethics training. It's posted on our website. We were able to do it for free. We used state services resources to do that, and an existing contract with IT management company to do that. We've had over 1,000 people take the training so far. We're at a rate of like over 100 per week. So the increase in demand for our services really kind of tracks when people take the ethics training. So right now we're getting a lot of requests from municipal officers asking for advice. We're also getting a lot of requests for municipal people interested in potentially filing municipal complaints, or they just have questions and they do it in the context of filing a complaint. I think we've had 12 or 13 municipal complaints this year, which is a very high rate of complaints. I would say last year, I think we had 20 something for the entire year. That's not counting state complaints. But just from perspective, the demand for our services has been growing every year since I've been in this position, while our staffing has stayed the same. And it's gotten to the point where it's beyond our capacity to actually handle. I mean, just speaking frankly, I work more than a 40-hour week. This is not my only job. I also work for a law firm. And so at this point, it's unsustainable to this much longer. We made the staffing request last year in conjunction with the passage of Act 171. This is partially my fault. I did not want to ask for staff before I knew that the legislation was going to move forward, because I only wanted to ask for what we needed.
That was the municipal law that changed the open meeting law and the ethics things?
So there's three parts. Act 71 increased financial disclosure requirements, so it added new categories of people who have to file financial disclosures to include county officials. It increased the level of financial disclosure, so there's a lot of additional questions that people need to answer when they file their financial disclosure requirements. We developed an online filing system. That was another project that we did last year. And so last year was the first year, I think, that people could file their financial disclosures online versus a PDF. And there's also investigatory hearing powers for the Ethics Commission. And so those were the three main things that were encompassed in the package last year.
Joint investigative powers, what did you call them?
Investigatory and hearing powers.
Okay.
So we can now investigate complaints. So those were the...
Before you just could investigate them and you could... When you got complaints, what did you do?
Refer them. And so where we are in terms of becoming, I would say, a real ethics commission, that was one big step forward for us. Because when it comes to ethics accountability, one of the most important things is to have an independent entity that can look into ethics complaints. And this is really to serve, the public, because most people when we have a lot of complaint inquiries, one of the reasons people don't move forward with their complaint inquiry that I found over the past 3 years is that when they hear that it's going to go back to the entity that they are coming from, for investigation, they just give up and they say, well, I've already been there. I don't believe that I'm going to get a fair shake, and then they don't move forward with their complaint. And so we received investigatory powers. I'll say that we did not ask for them. This was a decision by the House to add them. We actually said last year we're not prepared this year to take on investigative powers. They really wanted for us to have them, and this is part of where the staffing needs come in. So the staffing needs really come in when it comes to the investigatory powers, but also the new level of municipal work. And so, as I said, when we have the training requirement go into effect, as people take the training, they understand that they can request services for us, services can increase, demand for services increases. And so right now we're seeing that with municipal officials. Next year, starting this summer, it also includes state officials, because it'll be 3 years since they had to initially take the training, so we'll be retaking the training this summer. So we fully expect there to be kind of like a big, wave of people asking for our services. And we have, like I said, we have 2 part-time people. I'm the only person. TJ is there. We recently contracted with a local attorney to help with municipal issues, but we really just do not have the staff there to handle the demand. But I think it's particularly important for the public to have confidence that there's ethics accountability right now. I mean, when we're looking at what's going on in the country now, I think we're seeing a lot of ethics accountability being rolled back, being ignored. And Vermont, we're really in a place where we're just starting to move forward with these very, basic things that other states have had in place for a long time, but we're not keeping up in terms of the staffing to be able to actually handle the demand for the work. TJ, I've asked TJ to join me today because he does have a lot of experience with other state ethics commissions, so he can kind of weigh in on what normal staffing would look like. But I can say for comparison, Rhode Island is the prime example in New England for a state that does ethics really, really well. And they're also very similar to Vermont in that they have state code of ethics that applies to municipalities and government officials. They handle training for everyone. They investigate complaints. They have a staff of 13. So right now we're nearing the level of responsibilities that an ethics commission like that has, but we don't have anywhere near, the staffing that they do. And so I'll say when it comes to investigations, we do understand that, even with 2 additional staff people, we're not going to be able to investigate every complaint. So we see the breakdown happening where we would handle very simple complaints where somebody inadvertently breaches the code of ethics, or it's something very minor and can handle with a resolution agreement. So that's like a confidential agreement. Someone's filed a complaint, we talk to the complainant and say, if these facts are true, you've likely violated the code of ethics. It's not, going to be a very serious matter. Do you agree to additional training? Or, we can just handle this through a resolution agreement. So those would be the types of complaints that we're handling. And then there's another category of complaints, and I think this is where the powers that the House decided to give us, or the legislature decided to give us last year, come from. There's a category of people who there's no place to refer those complaints to. So those include commission members, board and commission members. So we've had people in the past try and file complaints related to, commission member, the conflict of interest or misuse of position, and there's just nowhere to send it. So they can file it with us, but we have to immediately close it. I've attempted in the past to reach out to commissions and saying, would you be willing to handle it? And the answer we've gotten back has been no. So it's that. Also statewide elected officials, there's no place to send those complaints. I think part of the push last year, we saw that there were some issues with state's attorneys. We were approached, by more than one entity asking if we could handle a complaint, because there was a desire to see it investigated and for the findings to become public. So even though there's no enforcement authority, just to establish that certain behavior is unethical, but we couldn't do that. And so
but there was cases in the past of people issuing a complaint against statewide elected officials and the Ethics Commission making a determination.
When the ethics first, that was not a complaint. I think there was an advisory opinion request, and I think that was maybe the first 1 or 2 years where the Ethics Commission started. And so somebody did file requested an advisory opinion.
Okay.
It was since revoked. I think it was just very early stages, maybe the first year of the Ethics Commission, and they decided that they had made a mistake and they rolled it back. But that was 2 executive directors ago and
Right.
several years ago.
And the advisory opinion is just like, in the opinion of the commission, we think this was an ethical violation.
No, so an
Right
advisory
now.
opinion, sorry, I should go back. So we mainly provide services, and so the services we provide are confidential advice, and that's when somebody can call us and ask us, about their own conduct. So they say, I'm planning on doing this, do you see an ethical issue with that? The other route they can take is to request an advisory opinion, which is a written opinion that's posted on our website. And so they request that advisory opinion knowing that it's going to be posted on our website. And just speaking honestly, usually people who request those opinions know what the answer is going to be in advance. But they know they're about to do something that other
They
people...
could ask about somebody else. They don't have to ask about...
They can only ask about themselves.
Oh, okay.
They can't ask about anyone else.
Okay.
So usually people ask when they say, I know that I'm going to do something, and I've been hearing from other people, they think this might be unethical. I'm not sure. I would really like to have something in writing that everyone can see. And so when people, suggest that I'm doing something unethical, I have this advisory opinion that states what the actual situation is. And in the advisory opinion, we provide advice. So we say, if you do X, Y, Z, then yes, this would breach the code of ethics. If you do X, Y, Z, then it would not. So we kind of give them steps that they can take to make sure they're staying within the code of ethics.
Senator,
Maybe I'm confusing 2 things, but it seems like the first thing you said was confidential advice. Second thing was an advisory opinion that would be posted. So you gave an example of somebody who wants to be able to be exonerated prospectively by saying, look at this opinion, but it's going to be posted whatever the opinion is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why would somebody not get the confidential advice? I think it would be crazy not to get the confidential advice first, but to ask for an advisory opinion first, because it could go against you and be posted.
Yep, and a lot of people ask for the confidential advice first. So they say,
Okay.
I'm bringing you this question. Can you tell me, would this violate the code of ethics? And say, we see it this way. And then
they ask for an advisory opinion to be posted.
yeah, so that it's clear to everyone that they are doing the right thing. We have had cases where people have asked for advisory opinions and not asked for confidential advice too, because they just really want to know what they're supposed to do.
And the one that was rolled back, as I remember, was an advisory opinion about the governor, what he was doing in a certain instance.
Yeah.
And they found, provisionally at that time that it might be a conflict of interest. Then it wound up getting rolled back because I think they realized it wasn't their function to be providing opinions about other people based on.
Yeah, and like I said, that was before my time, but it did end up being revoked, and that was like the very early days. I think there was a completely different commission in place then, and there's a different executive director.
Yeah.
I think it was in 2018. So I think the commissioners realized that they had made a mistake and they shouldn't have done that, and so, but it was, I think like 6 years ago now.
Thank you.
so would the executive director still be part-time? You're looking for 2 full-time staff, and your position and the other position would remain part-time?
Yeah. And I think there are other options. I think for myself, I took this position because it was part-time. It hasn't turned out to be that way. And so eventually the executive director position should be a full-time position. And so I'm a bit hesitant to give alternate examples of like how things could work, because I really do think that what we need are the 2 positions, the legal counsel and the staff attorney. So the staff attorney would handle municipal ethics and training primarily, and the legal counsel would handle state ethics primarily. I think there's an option of if you had just an ethics He's the legal counsel and then the full-time executive director position.
And that's the 299 total, or no, 336 would be
Yes.
the total ask, the additional base
Yeah.
for those two positions.
So I'm a little confused here.
Okay.
So she's at 223, 562, right? And they're asking for what?
Two positions. If you look at the,
Yeah.
I just closed it because
I don't have my iPad.
oh, okay. Oh, not, it wouldn't be in there. We're looking for two positions, a general counsel and a staff attorney.
At what cost?
The general counsel total cost is 155, 429. That's with benefits. And then the staff attorney is 131, 654. And then there's basically indirect or operating costs, which would be like, I don't know what you call the operating costs.
So it'd be, we need additional space. Right now, we have an incredibly small office that doesn't even fit one person, computers, things that just go with adding, new people to the office.
So I'd call that $12,000 additional indirect for those two positions. So that gets you to 299, and then they have a $37,000 ask for new investigation requirements. So what is that? Is that equipment or what is that? Just time?
That would be to hire a contract investigator in cases where we would need one. So as I mentioned, when we're investigating complaints, they'd be the very minor ones and then the very large ones where there's no one else where there are very, very complicated fact patterns. And so where we would anticipate it actually going to a hearing and we would need somebody to investigate it. So this would be the way to have the outside investigator without actually having to hire someone as a full-time position.
So that gets you to 336,083. 336,083. And is that in the governor's recommend?
No, I will say, in our conversations with the governor's office about the budget, I will say that it took away 2 points from that. One was, so Act 171 was the big ethics legislation last year. He let it go into effect without signing it. During our budget meeting, I was told that his main objection was that we did not get the funding that we needed. And so that was the reason that why he didn't sign. I don't want to speak for them, but I was told that that was the biggest objection to the ethics package, is that we didn't get additional staff or additional funding. We did ask for those positions that they could be included in the governor's budget, and my understanding is that the feeling was that the legislature gave us the responsibilities, that the legislature should be the one who gave us the funding. I do not have any reason to believe that I don't have any reason to believe that the governor's office would object to us getting those positions. I can't obviously speak for them in any way. We have never had the impression from the governor's office that they object to the ethics commission, the concept of ethics. They've been very supportive to the concept of the ethics commission. And so I don't believe that they didn't include us in their budget because they objected to us getting the positions, but more because they thought the legislature should be the ones to provide the funding.
Except after that first decision.
Yeah.
Maybe at that time they weren't that as excited about it.
Yeah.
Are you still on Bailey Avenue or not?
Baldwin, yeah. I will say that, I've been here for 3.5 years, and we have intentionally very little contact with the other branches of government, except for when we have to. I think we've had a very good relationship with their office when it comes to ethics issues, and we really have had nothing but support, generally speaking. So, but I do know TJ would be able to just give a couple of statements regarding, the importance of ethics.
We have another question for Senator Norris, and then we can go to TJ.
Yes, so you've got two part-time positions.
Right now, yes.
What's their function?
Executive director and administrative assistant.
I thought you were executive. Oh, you are one of the part-time positions. Okay,
Yeah.
that helps that out. So, not being all that familiar with, I remember you being in GovOps last year when I was in GovOps. What's your caseload look like per part-time employee here?
Caseload, so, it varies. So as I said, this year we've had, almost, I'd say high 30s in terms of requests for guidance. And so, is what you want to call a caseload. I did write a letter about what we've been experiencing this year in terms of
Pie charts.
Okay, I'll have my iPad down in judiciary.
yeah. I would say between this year and last year, we've had more than a 44% increase in the number of complaints that we're receiving. Between last year and this year, it was a 400% increase in our caseload. So I'd say this year we've had about 15 complaints that have been filed. I will say that when we compare it to other states, the Rhode Island Ethics Commission testified on behalf of Senate Government Operations a few years ago. We're talking about state code of ethics. They said their caseload, number of complaints filed with the commission per year was 33. And so this year, in the first 3 months, we've already had 15 complaints that have been filed, and that's with a full staff that's investigating complaints. When it comes to inquiries per day, I said I'm getting 3 or 4 inquiries per day from people who are requesting ethics advice. We've had, I think, 2 requests for advisory opinions so far this year. Advisory opinions are very time consuming. They take many hours of research. One was withdrawn. The other one is posted on our website. The main area that we're getting demand for services from right now is municipal officials. So I would say that I would get, at least 20 calls a week from municipal officials at this point in time. In terms of caseload, I think it's a bit difficult to call it, a caseload because we're not investigating complaints. So in terms of like a case that moves forward versus requests for guidance, requests for assistance when it comes to complaint inquiries, and actual processing complaints.
And I don't mean to, by any means downplay the importance of the Ethics Commission, but I'm looking at when the state's attorneys come in here and tell us they're averaging 600 cases per victim's advocate, 350 cases per deputy state's attorney. When Big Hartwin comes in here and says she's averaging like 100 and they're asking for positions. I'm just trying to, and maybe it's so, I'm just trying to justify his 37 cases enough to justify 2 full-time positions is what I'm trying to wrap my head around here.
Yeah.
But I don't have the pie or the chart in front of me here, so I just need time to look at it.
I think part of the demand for services for them is coming from the fact that they investigate complaints, right? And so when people reach out to us, now that we actually have investigatory powers that go into effect next year, I do think you're going to see the demand for services when it comes to complaint investigation increase quite a bit. When it comes to our office right now, we just have a different function. So when you're talking about caseloads for them, they're talking about, cases that they're pursuing in court or pursuing in some other way. When people come to our office, we're more of a service provider. And so what we're doing is providing advice and guidance and training. So there's a lot of similarities between, what we like the Human Rights Commission might do, but it's also a little bit, apples and oranges when it comes to what we're actually doing for people in college. So when we're talking about like caseload, it's a different situation because we're not taking a case and then proceeding with it towards the end. I can tell you that if we actually had investigative hearing powers right now, we would have an overloaded demand for our services based on the number of people who come to us with complaint inquiries. And just to explain the seriousness of this, I would say the number of people I've had calling me recently who have actually kind of expressed to me that they have PTSD. I mean, they actually use that term in dealing with like legitimate ethics issues in their municipalities, especially. We have some people who are like really struggling with trying to do the right thing in municipalities. We have, plenty of municipal officials they've expressed gratitude. They're glad they have the ethics framework in place now. But there are some places where there are real serious issues when it comes to financial mismanagement, when it comes to conflicts of interest, when it comes to self-dealing in contracts. And we had a number of people reach out to us and are just really looking for someone to aid them. And right now we can't.
When do your powers, investigative powers kick in and start?
September 1st.
September.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Jones, did you have a statement that you wanted to make?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor of ethics and accountability in government at the University of Connecticut. I was formerly the executive director of the Fair Political Practices Commission in California, and I was the first appointed ethics enforcement officer in the state of Connecticut. Now I consult with state and local entities in trying to help them navigate their either new or growing ethics offices. And so I've been honored to be able to help the state of Vermont over the past few years. I just wanted to dovetail on a couple of things that Executive Director Sibrit said and sort of hone in on where this agency is in terms of the growth arc. Right now, the most important thing for an agency, and this agency in particular, is that education and training function. They've just inherited municipalities, many of which didn't have their own ethics code. And there's an inundation of ethics inquiries and sort of a misunderstanding of what the rules are. So at this point in the trajectory, the most valuable resources are those people who can help the education and the training function. The enforcement function is also important, but the enforcement function really applies only to that 0.0001 of Vermont employees who know the rules but decide that they don't want to abide by them. And fortunately, there's very few people in that regard. Just to give you some perspective, when Vermont passed its code of ethics, that same legislative session, the state of New Mexico also passed legislation forming their first state ethics commission. At that time, they had one full-time director. They now have 10 people in that office, most of them dedicated toward this advisory and training function, and only a couple of investigators who deal with the complaint function. And if you think about it, it's only fair. I mean, if you're going to tell people that, they're going to get a complaint unless they follow the rules, they got to know what the rules are first. And that's what the training and education function is. And when I talk about that, I'm also including with that this advisory opinion function. Training and education for those who don't know the rules, advice for those people who kind of know the rules but want to make sure they're on the right plane. And that's where I think the money is best spent here. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions, and I hope that was at least somewhat helpful.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And also just add on to him, I'm talking about justifying positions. I work more than 40 hours a week now, and it's a 20-hour-a-week job. I mean, just speaking bluntly, because I'm not working in my other position, I lose a minimum of $2,000 a month financially, plus all of my free time. But I'm willing to do it because I think ethics is really important, and I feel like it's my contribution to, the country at this moment in time. So I'm already working more than 40 hours a week. TJ is also working many, many hours per week for us, more than I think he ever initially anticipated. And now we have an additional, local attorney who's working on municipal ethics issues for us. And that is just doing the minimum before we have these other requirements that are going to go into effect in a few months. So we're talking about the need for the position. The only reason we're covering the work right now is because I've been willing to do so much unpaid overtime. So the demand is there. Like, I know when I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning and waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning, every day of the week just to try and get it done. And that's without us being able to, and that's us, keeping the lights on. That's not us being able to really do higher quality work, expand the work within the framework we've already been given, but would love to be going around training municipal officials in person. Like, we would love to be able to do that, as well as state employees. Would love to be, really pushing advisory opinions, because the other states have, dozens of advisory opinions per year, and would really like to be pushing that as an option for people to get it in writing so other people can reference it. But right now, if an advisory opinion request comes in, I have to who's going to be able to do this,
So the trainings now are, like, you send a module or web-based training. You're not doing any in-person training.
We developed in our office from scratch an online training. It's 45 minutes long. It's available through our website. And so people can take the training, municipal officials take the training. They get an automatic certificate of completion when it's done, and we log it in on our end.
It's the training of the code.
The municipal code of ethics, yes. We also have one for state employees, and we're in the process of updating that so that people will have a new training when they have to take it this summer as well, when they hit their 3-year mark. So when it comes to demand for services, I mean, we're already stretched well beyond what we're actually funded for and staffed for, just in reality at this moment. And that's without doing all the additional work that we could be doing within the existing framework. And that's all without these new responsibilities kicking in a few months, because because we didn't get the positions last year, we're on like a delayed schedule. And so, in order to have a really high functioning ethics commission, which I think, the public, not just the public, but officials themselves deserve that, right? I mean, a lot of people look at the ethics commission and are afraid that we're there to punish them, but we're really there to help people to know, when they're doing the right thing, how to comply with the law. We're talking about advisory opinions. Yeah, people see the value in advisory opinions because they want people to know they're doing the right thing. I mean, our only municipal opinion that advisory opinion we've issued so far is because jointly municipal officials in the town came and asked us. They had something that they felt was going to be pretty controversial in the town, and they wanted us to tell them, what can we actually do within the code of ethics, and they wanted it to be posted so that everyone in the town could see that they were following the rules.
Are there states that have legislative code of ethics, like the electeds have signed a code of ethics?
Yeah, I mean, I think states do it differently, and so like when you're looking at states that are doing it, like well, TJ can speak more on that because he's a national expert, but yeah, so the way that the Vermont has decided to do it is to go with the same standards apply to everyone, right? No matter who you are, and that's the principle. And so it's been the defining principle of ethics commissions to start. If you do one for one branch of government, you have to have the same rules for everyone. The one exception is when it comes to core legislative functions, because that is a constitutional issue. So when we developed the state code of ethics, core legislative functions, which means committee assignments, voting, those are exempt from the state code of ethics. So when it comes to how the ethics commission approaches the code of ethics when it comes to legislators, we advise, we can give advice when it comes to the state code of ethics outside of core legislative functions and not when it applies to core
That's what I
legislative
wanted to share
functions.
with, like,
So
a
that's
legislative specific one. Because we don't, like, when the governor appoints people, they sign that state code of ethics, but the legislators don't sign the code of ethics.
I think that's executive branch has their own separate code of ethics, and that's different from the state code of ethics. So the state code of ethics is one set of rules that applies to everyone equally outside of the executive code of ethics and any personnel policies that may be in place. So with the state code of ethics, the idea is that it's a floor, and we have a very basic state code of ethics.
Right.
And just, you know, it's a very basic one. Other states have much more developed ones, but that same one applies to everyone. So conflicts of interest rules, you know, apply to legislators under the state code of ethics when it comes to things like, say you're sitting on a hiring committee and your brother applies for the job, you still have to recuse yourself under the state code of ethics rules. When it comes to whether you have a code of ethics, voting on a matter, then that's something that falls under core legislative functions, and that's exempt from the state code of ethics.
So like gifts, would that fall under the state code of ethics?
Yeah.
Or under like campaign finance?
Campaign finance, well, so there's campaign finance law is a separate thing, but we're talking about a gift. So you have a constituent who comes up and gives you $500, and it doesn't, a gift worth $500. So what you would be doing is you'd be looking under the state code of ethics to see if it violates gift rules, because a gift is something that anyone can do. Not only a legislator can accept a gift, right? So that's the dividing line. Is it something only you can do as a legislator, or can anyone who works in the state government do that? So whether you can accept the gift falls under the state code of ethics. We can advise you against that. Somebody can file a complaint against you, you know, regarding that. But whether or not that would impact whether you can vote on the issue, that's considered a core legislative function, so that falls outside. So that's the dividing line.
Okay. Somebody have a question?
I do.
Senator Brown.
How do you interact with municipalities that have their own code of ethics, ethics commission? Since last year, we passed that bill last year.
So there's very few that have their own ethics commissions. I think maybe just a couple. I can only think of, you know, potentially one. So when it comes to like municipal specific ethics policies, what the municipal code of ethics did is attract the approach of the state code of ethics, and so municipalities can set higher standards or fill in where the statewide code of ethics is silent, but they can't create lower standards. So when we have municipalities, you know, call and ask us for advice. So one of the questions is, you know, basically do you have municipal specific policies? They'll say there was a requirement that all municipalities had a conflict of interest policy in place. Not all municipalities did that. However, the statewide municipal code of ethics addresses other issues like gifts, misuse of position, and not every municipality has those covered in the ethics policies. So we're talking about somebody who's coming to us with a complaint. We talk about whether it falls under the state code of ethics, the statewide municipal code of ethics. If it does not, then we say, okay, your municipality could have higher standards in place. And so that would be the next level of question. So people can file a complaint with us under the state code of ethics, not under municipal policies. Then we refer to the municipality for investigation. If it is something that does not fall under the statewide municipal code of ethics, then we say, okay, check your municipal specific policies and see if you can file a complaint directly with the municipality if it falls outside of the statewide municipal code of ethics. But the framework for discussing it is the statewide municipal code of ethics is the floor, but municipalities can have their own specific policies in place that create higher standards.
And they can create their own commissions to take complaints and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think Colchester, where I'm from, does. And so I was wondering, is there a duplication of efforts there at all, occasionally, or?
Well, the way we work is, so we can accept any complaint, and that helps people understand what is an ethics complaint and what isn't. Because we do get people calling, you know, asking to make complaints about open meeting law, or a lot of people want to make complaints about meeting conduct. We say, okay, that does not fall under the state code of ethics. If Colchester has a policy in place relating to meeting conduct, then maybe you can file a complaint directly with them. But what we do is once the complaint has been filed with us, we refer it to Colchester, and then they would take it over and they would use their processes to handle the complaint.
Yeah.
So it's like we're this first point or and engaging with the public if they want to talk to somebody who is, outside of the municipality first.
So Colchester has their own ethics commission?
Yes,
They were
Or
concerned about,
ethics code,
commission.
commission,
well,
okay.
they were concerned about their elected officials there.
No?
That was good. They knew it.
Well, they made me give a vote back. No, they started it a few years ago and testified up here, and I guess it's their bylaws or guidelines are above and beyond what was required.
I just testify another example of like a situation where the statewide municipal code of ethics wouldn't really impact them, because if they already have higher standards in place, then they're not really required to do anything new other than take the training on the state code of ethics. However, they can still have their own training if they want to, and give their own training on the state code of ethics. They just would show us the materials first, so we can make sure it covers all of the main points.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I just practically speaking, I think I forgot to mention a point. No, we've been funded through the Internal Service Fund, mainly since the inception of the Ethics Commission, and I don't know if it makes a difference, but I know we're talking now about the general fund. We will continue to have, people working on state issues and.
How are you funded with the internal service fund? What do you mean that, like, when other agencies ask for an opinion, you charge them for it? Or?
I think our entire budget came from the Internal Service Fund, but Brenda Berry, I think, could explain that.
Does that make sense? What does that mean?
It's part of maybe Brendan should.
Okay, Brenda, can you explain that?
The Ethics Commission, State Ethics Commission budget comes from the Human Resource Internal Service Fund. So it's collected from all different agencies of state government, and they get a small portion of the Human Resource Fund.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think that's only the municipal work that would be needed to be funded through the general fund versus the Internal Service Fund. And so our legal counsel would be really working on state level issues primarily. And so I didn't know if that made a difference in terms of the funding for that position could come from the Internal Service Fund versus we're only looking for one position that would need to be funded through the general fund. But I say that with not really understanding the intricacies of how the budget works, but just knowing how we've been funded up to this point.
I think there is a limit on the percentage of the HR fund that Ethics Commission can obtain.
Right. You only have so much money you're collecting through that fee for HR, and you have all the other HR staff and expenses you gotta meet. So.
Correct. So I think this additional request is a general fund request.
Okay. Okay, any other questions about ethics? It's ethical to ask about it. We won't suspect that
You're just kicking it out of the park.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yes, Senator Weston.
Can we get testimony on the vote that he had?
Well, I'd be happy to report that I checked with the president of the Ethics Commission, and for the last 2 years since it's been in play, they haven't had one complaint, which is good.
Cool.
Oh, no, that's great to
See
see.
how those numbers change after the YouTube.
Well, the first time I
I do
met,
have a little fishing boat, but
Yeah.
nothing
Thank you.
much.
but that wasn't the one that back in the day they left out on the ice and.
Oh, really?
That Dick was so